Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Josephine Watson, and I'm the Commercial Projects Editor at IGB. We're delighted to be hosting a webinar today on driving casino yield through AI-driven hyper-personalisation, which is sponsored by Symphony Solutions, your premier provider of custom iGaming software solutions. So personalization of the online casino experience can excite and retain customers far beyond the reach of bonusing and free spins. Through striking the right balance between the deployment and of smart technology, a motivated and informed customer experience team, and a seamless integration into operations, Symphony says that personalization can lead to stratospheric increases in turnover, retention, and GGR. Today, we'll be discussing the opportunities, benefits, and challenges around personalization, as well as touching on the key takeaways from our panelists. So we'll start by introducing said panel. First off, we will be kicking off with Damien Evans, co-founder and CEO of Graphyte. Damien, do you mind saying a few words to introduce yourself?
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Josie. Hi, everybody. I'm the CEO of Graphyte, and I've been flying the flag for personalization for a long time now. So the last couple of years as a supplier in the space, like trying to change the agenda for personalization. But back in the 5 years I spent at Ladbrokes Coral, where we looked at lots of different ways of trying to use technology to bring personalization into the betting experience in particular. So a lot of insight to share. I'm really looking forward to the session, and I hope, if nothing else, we can help everybody demystify the aura that surrounds personalization, highlight some of the benefits and some of the pitfalls, and you can take away a very clear approach on your strategies going forward.
Lovely, thank you very much, Damien. Next up is Eduardo dos Remedios, VP iGaming at Symphony Solutions. Take it away, Eduardo.
Good afternoon, everybody. It's a real pleasure to be here. I'm VP of iGaming at Symphony Solutions. I joined them in November of last year, having spent the last, giving away my age now, at least 12 years, let's say that, in the iGaming industry. This is my first online webinar, believe it or not, so I'm really looking forward to it. I would like to remind you all that it's an interactive session, so don't be shy, ask your questions, and we'll do our very best to answer. Thank you.
Lovely, thanks so much, Eduardo. And then last but not least, we have Maria Grigorova, that's my bad entirely, Customer Journey Optimization Manager at Ladbrokes Coral. Could you also introduce yourself for our audience today?
Hi, thank you very much for introduction. I'm Maria, and my work is about optimization of the product. I worked in the gaming industry for over 13 years. I remember the times when we only had desktop version of the site and everything was very primitive. And I've been doing optimization work for GVC for over 2 years now, and I've been working with Graphyte for over 1 year, and I can say that the way how the product changed my work can be described in half an hour or 1 hour session, but I'll try my best to give you an impression of how it is to work with Graphyte.
Excellent. Thanks so much, everyone, for introducing yourselves. A final heads up to our audience before we kick off the discussion. As Eduardo mentioned, it's an interactive session, and there will be a Q&A section following the main panel. So as we go along, please do submit questions, and we'll try to address as many of them as possible in the allocated time. You can do that by clicking on the Questions tab on the GoToWebinar interface. With that, let's kick off with the discussion. So, Damien, we're going to start with a question for you today. In general, do you think that casino operators are offering personalized experiences to their players?
Well, this is a really good place to start, actually. So we do tons of research into the space constantly. The nature of our business is around the propagation and I think education around personalization. So we have as good a picture as I think anybody would in terms of adoption. And in truth, I think it's a very nascent state in terms of like deployment and general adoption of personalization in gaming. There are tentative approaches seen in various operators, and that by that can mean something as simple as recently played games. So recently played games, although it's not the most sophisticated technology, right? It's not necessarily like high-powered algorithms that's driving it. It is at the very crux of it, highly personalized and unique to each user, right? It's what they played, and they're the only user that would have seen it. I'm sure Maria can attest to it as well, but the level of traction generated from recently played is absolutely massive. So it proves the importance of having personalized content, even when it's kind of quite simplistic in its approach and its deployment. Elsewhere, you might see various kind of implementations of recommendation portlets and algorithms, but the degree of sophistication varies wildly. And we're genuine experts in this space, so we can sniff out what is good and what is less good. Let's be politically correct. And there's very few and far between examples where we can go and look at a site, interact with the site with a specific kind of behavior, and we'll see that something is very smart. So the short answer is it isn't particularly well adopted at all, and that's the whole part of our mission as a company. But even operator side, it's what we were trying to do at Elaborate Sparrow. The interesting thing for me is that if we look outside of gaming as a vertical and look to some of the synergistic industries, so let's think like e-commerce to a degree, but definitely media-related streaming services. So Netflix is the classic case, right? Spotify, but even into like Steam, for example. Steam is an online gaming platform. All of those sites not just use personalization to enhance the experience, but actually it's the core of the revenue model. It's the core of growth. It's the core of retention. And when you look at the crux of those products, the very nature of those products, it's entertainment and it's fun. Now, if you like, let's juxtapose that lens onto a casino. It's exactly the same thing. They're all visual. They're fun products. It's leisure. And it's absolutely right to embrace those same principles to drive the customer experience. And we see that in very few places. So I think the adoption is far lower than it needs to be. And I think my lasting point on this would be, if you're putting an operator lens on it, if you're an operator thinking about personalization, look out into the competitive set. So few of your competitors will be doing this, right? It gives you a really clear chance to go and gain a competitive edge. And with the right kind of partner and solution and approach and strategy, you can do that really quickly as well.
And that leads over very naturally to Maria, asking the same question to you. Do you think casino operators are offering personalized experience to their players?
Well, I'm on the same plate with Damien here. When it comes to personalization, I mostly find my inspiration outside the industry. I look at Amazon, Netflix, some big retailers, and I see how they personalize their search, how they provide recommendations, how they show relevant products on homepage. And during my recent competitor research, I was not very impressed with the examples I saw. For instance, I logged in on one of well-known sites 2 days after my previous gameplay, and I didn't see my recently played games. Then I launched a new game, and only after that point, recently played games appeared, including the game that I didn't play, just launched and closed it. And also at this point, I've got some recommendations on the homepage. And then I logged in with a different account, launched completely different game, but got exactly the same recommendations. So to me, it's not a personalization. It's just a same set of recommendations for everybody. And it also tells me that this particular competitor is not using the data that they collect about players very efficiently. So we collect a lot of information with web analytic tools, and we need to find a really good use for it, implementing truly personalized experience.
Wonderful, thank you. And obviously personalization is something that in one way, shape or form, people have been saying they're doing for a long time. But there's not necessarily always an understanding of how important it might be for a casino or gaming operators in general to introduce it to their customer experience. Eduardo, perhaps you can comment on this.
Yeah, I think I'd like to go back to Damien's point talking about Netflix and the fact that we as consumers are almost taking it for granted now that we should have highly personalized experiences. I'm used to it on Netflix and I'm used to it on Amazon. And so when I don't get that when I'm in my iGaming ecosystem, you know, it kind of chafes a bit. So the opportunity there is enormous, and I think it's the cost of delay. In other words, not doing something there is something I would underline. Personalization, as it's changed over the years, it's ironically started out with pretty static campaigns on the campaign side, gradually got a little bit more sophisticated, and then personalization was kind of one to a large group, which is not very personalized, is it? And then as it matured, it got one to a slightly smaller group. But as we'll talk about here today, what Graphyte are offering is a one-to-one experience, which is really compelling, actually.
And Maria, Damien, would you have any final salient points you'd want to add about why it's so important for operators to add personalization?
Well, we cannot underestimate benefits of personalization. We live in a very dynamic time when people easily get distracted. Nowadays, most of customers play on their mobile, which means that we have less time to grab their attention and to make sure that we convert them. That's why it's very important to offer them product that they are looking for, and to make sure that we deliver right experience in shortest time. My personalization journey also started from recently played games and favorites. And while we saw amazing uplift on number of games played when showing recently played games, we also identified that retention rate depends on number of games that each customer plays. And then it's a tricky bit. How do you introduce new games to customers? How do you make sure that customer extend the number and varieties of games they played? Because if they're going to come back to recently played all the time, they will end up playing the same games. This is where game recommendations with intelligence that Graphyte offers comes very useful. I saw how some lobby managers try to publish and push as much content as possible to the homepage. However, quantity doesn't always mean quality. And when we analyzed how customers interact with the gaming content on homepage, we found that a lot of them only launch games from one particular area, and they're absolutely blind to other content. So if you know that certain customer always launches a game from, let's say, jackpot slots, and they have to scroll each time they come to your homepage all the way down on their mobile, it's not the best experience you can provide. And if you have tools that allow you to restructure your homepage to meet expectations of each particular user and to show them individual example, this is going to massively help you to achieve your KPIs, and it will create very enjoyable experience for the players, and all the data that you collected about player will find a really good implementation.
I think that leads really nicely onto the next segment of our discussion today, which is actually on those benefits of personalization for the player and for the operator. Damien, I'll start with you. What benefits did the players in particular see from personalized content, in addition to what Maria has already discussed?
Well, I actually want to pick up on a point Maria just made, in that we know that the overwhelming majority of gameplay on any operator is done off the homepage. Like in some cases 60%, some cases 70%, in some cases more. Right, so players do 100% of their activity off the homepage, off the lobby. So Maria was just talking about the importance of the lobby. That can't be underestimated. We also highlighted how if you're interested in jackpot slots and that's in portlet number 75 on a massive long homepage on mobile, the chance of you engaging with content down at the bottom is really slim. Right, the proportion of gameplay from the bottom of the page is tiny relative to those in the prime real estate slots. So it's so fundamentally important to get that right, to get that lobby right, because most players will not deviate from launching from the lobby. And on this slide here, there's some points that I actually want to kind of create a triangle. So knowing that you've got 60–70% of activity on your whole site, and so basically 70% of your revenue is coming from the homepage. Let's put it in revenue terms. What we're talking about with personalization is like a sustainable way of keeping people's attention by driving discovery and improved product engagement. So 2 stats to look at on this page. We've seen actually higher rates than this in places, but let's assume a 20% reduction in bounce rate. So bounce rate, for those that don't know, is if somebody logs into the site and authenticates and then they don't play, they disappear. Right, so that's a bad experience. Someone's taken the time to log into the site, they've looked around and gone there, and they've gone somewhere else, right? And it's through promiscuity and all those kind of things, but ultimately it's because they're not finding something interesting. This is a really important, like, non-financial stat related to personalization. That's what we're trying to change, is getting people to log in and play. That's the real crux of what we're trying to do. How do you do that? You bring in the right content. So that one key KPI, you get engaging more players, keeping them coming back consistently over time. And those, with the right implementation of personalization, that bounce rate reduction will just keep going down. It will keep getting better and better and better and better for every player. The second point, 25% increase in new game launch. So this is by taking, everybody knows, everyone in the casino space knows that new games drive massive amounts of retention and excitement. That's every player loves, and we all like new stuff, right? Whether we're shopping online, whatever it is, everybody likes new stuff. By adding targeting to new games, you can increase the engagement by 25+% in terms of new gameplay. We see this like clockwork wherever we've got like smart stuff implemented with new games. But in general, new game engagement is high across casinos. Why is that? Because it's new. So think about that homepage example again, where we've got 60–70% of activity exclusively launched from the homepage. That can be, let's say you can represent 20–25% absolute maximum of your gaming inventory on the homepage. Everything else will be buried somewhere else. How do you maximize the content from the other 80% of games to keep bringing back that fresh new experience that you get when you see a promoted new game? It's exactly the same principle. That for me is like the core customer benefit. Aside from softer KPIs, it's understanding how players behave, what stimulates customers of any brand, whether it's gaming or retail, and how you keep that moving forward in a sustainable way that doesn't put too much pressure on lobby managers. They're already mega busy with the operational stuff and all that kind of thing, and it's based on the player. So that for me, that kind of triangle of behavior, insight, and newness is what makes it sustainable, keeps players engaged, drives retention, and all those other metrics through the content, through the power of the content that you already have on the site.
And both to both Maria and Eduardo, does this hold true for your experience as well? How have you guys seen player behaviors impacted by personalized offerings?
Yeah, absolutely. As Damien said, we've noticed that number of unconverted sessions reduced dramatically, which means that customers who come on site are more likely to play with us, and this is what we actually want to achieve. And then it finds reflection in financial KPIs. And nothing says that customers enjoyed their time on site as improved financial KPIs. Nobody wants to pay for a bad experience. And successful customer journey benefits both a customer and your business. If you find a way to make your product simpler and not to make customers think too much about how this site works, where to find this, where to find that. We know that single customer nowadays plays on more than one casino site, and we don't want them to think, okay, how do I work with this particular brand? Where do they keep this? Where do they keep that? They should find whatever they're looking for straight away.
Yeah, I mean, I'd echo that. It comes down to having a great experience. I mean, I cannot think of any operator that wouldn't say that the customer experience is the key thing. And what better customer experience can you give than one that's relevant to that person?
Yeah, I think it's definitely, I think the use cases and the validation for personalization as a strategy are something that should be clear and natural. But sometimes it has to be made more apparent exactly how it functions as part of your technology stack and how it functions as part of your strategy. And as with any solution, there are bound to be challenges. So it would be great to understand from each of you with your various perspectives what some of the biggest challenges involved with getting personalized content, pages, experiences, etc. live in gaming. Eduardo, perhaps you could kick us off with this one.
Yeah, certainly. It says the first point there says integration is simpler than you think. That's just one part of it, and it's true. But actually going and developing the AI products themselves, that's certainly not trivial. I know Damien has been working on it for a good 2 years before they could said it was a mature product. So it's certainly complex, I would say. And the challenges for an operator, you're competing with a very full product roadmap. And there's your kind of core BAU work that you're always trying to firefight or get on top of. And then to try and do something as complex as this, you know, it's a tough call, really. I always say, listen, if you're an operator, you wouldn't go and build your own financial software package, would you? You would go and get something that's working out there in the wild, and you go and get Sage So I would say, you know, certainly consider the challenges that I just mentioned. And look to somebody who's a specialist in it. And that's really what Damien at Graphyte has done for the last couple of years.
So,
oh, sorry, Damien, I was going to pass
no,
over to you.
go on.
Anyway.
No,
Yeah, I was just going to say from your end, Damien, with your different perspective, what are the challenges from your viewpoint?
well, I've got both sides of the coin on this. So spent years, actually, when I was industry side, operator side, spent years trying to get really suboptimal technology doing what we've done now. And I think part of the reason for that is because it's hard. Eduardo's alluded to it very clearly, right? It's hard to do this. It's a specific vertical. It's a specific set of kind of products and customers. And although like the bare bones of what we're trying to do is form the union of what players like, what products you have, how your site's set up, and what's the best way of showing it to them. With those four like pillars of personalization in casino is the essence of what we're doing. It's hard to build a product that functions that's flexible enough to support multiple different types of operation. It's not easy. I think that's probably directed towards like the in-house type approach, where it might seem like, oh, you can do it in-house, but actually it's fraught with things to learn and opportunities to fix things that you might not necessarily expect. So there's a definite kind of support for a specialist approach. I would say though that some of the challenges around are more almost operational. So these this kind of work, so personalization, can too often sit within, say, a customer experience team or maybe a product team or not, but you know, or a marketing team, right? So generally it tends to sit in a silo, and occasionally they cross over, but sometimes they cross over. But actually, in our experience, it always tends to be quite siloed. I think the key here is to make sure that the lobby management, the operations are as a core part of, if not the implementation and the strategy, then absolutely the rollout of this, because they need to be part of it. An informed lobby is the right balance of commercial constraints and then smart personalized stuff. That's what it should look like. An informed site should look like that. And so I think one of the key things is making sure you have the right people engaged, understand all the manual processes that can go along with operating a casino, right, of which there are many. Right, most backends are not the most sophisticated technologies. So making sure you understand all those manual processes. And then just one point, well, I do want to mention, because it's caused us an awful lot of pain over the past 6 months, building a solution for it, is specifically in the casino vertical, that some of the commercial constraints from suppliers in terms of what we have to show on a homepage and where can be really complicated. And I think there's a hesitation perhaps in some operators to deploy like deeper personalization or personalization at a higher scale, because they think, well, how the hell do I do that if I've got to get 10 pragmatic games in the first 93 on the homepage, for example, if I have to have the 19th slot being a play tech game or whichever it is. Those I can understand and see that could be a deterrent, because you still want to make it personal, but you've got to pay the bills, right? You've got to manage the commercials. I say that because we've built I think quite an elegant solution to cope with it. But those things are some of the, that's a real key challenge that you can't get away from. Like your homepage has constraints. So how do you manage the personalization within those constraints? A really important point. But it's overcomable, but it's something to highlight.
And finally, Maria, from your perspective, what are some of the biggest challenges?
Well, as from operator's perspective, one of the challenges, if we're talking about in-house solutions, is about connecting data points. You collect all the information about customers, as we've seen on this competitor example with the recently played games. You definitely collect this information. You know what your customers played before, but then how do you input this information into your CMS tool in order to show recently played games? How long can you keep this information to make sure that you deliver best experience even to players who've been with you for a long time? And then how quickly can you analyze the behavior of the player and come up with recommendations? Can you predict customers' next best action? Do you have resources for that internally? And then how can you input all this information back and show personalized experience to customers? Another challenge can be with resources. Sometimes you have a great idea and you put it on delivery roadmap, you go through this painful process of getting it approved, and then suddenly it gets deprioritized because something else comes up. And when you work with external providers, you can be sure that it's going to be delivered on time. At least this is the experience that I had with Graphyte. And obviously they found solution to all the questions on how to keep this information, how to send this information back at the right moment in order to deliver personalization experiences.
And then naturally, obviously, there's going to be challenges around actually integrating the technology itself, and how that becomes part of the stack. How hard is it to get personalized content on the site? Maybe Eduardo, you could kick us off with that.
It's easier than you might think. That's the first point on there. There's a couple of reasons. One is that we've done it quite a few times now, so we've learned the hard way through a lot of different iterations and learning, and we've documented the process from start to finish. I suppose the other thing is that we have a dedicated team working on this, so that certainly helps. In terms of the technology and the approach, Damien's probably the best one to talk you through it from the kind of Graphyte side. From the integration side, as I say, it's fairly straightforward for us. We always kick off with an integration and planning workshop to gain some insight into the operator's architecture. And then, of course, we run them through all of the various components and the APIs of our solution set. But Damien, if you want to add anything there.
Yeah, I would, thanks. I mean, I'll build on what Eduardo said. Integration is, I think, often perceived as being a bit of a pain in the butt, right? But it's a necessary evil. And we know, and we've got these two hats here in Graphyte, both like Rob, the CTO, and myself. We are ex-operator, and we know it's a constant stream of integrations with an operator, whether it's from streaming or pricing or whatever, the myriad different things we have to integrate. So we know they're a pain. We've deliberately engineered the platform to be as flexible as possible, and that by that I mean you can integrate multiple different ways. It's an incredibly lightweight schema, right? So that we don't need much information because we know integration is a pain in the butt, as you said, and it doesn't need to be. And I think that's again key. Integrating with any platform, if it looks like it's going to run and run and run and has like superfluous amounts of data and requirements to get going, that's probably something to avoid. We've tuned it to the point now where our record is 2 weeks end to end, which is, I think, ridiculous for a real-time personalization platform at this scale. Typically, 4 to 6 weeks is probably more realistic, but for a motivated pair of teams, it's doable in a couple of weeks. So it really doesn't have to be that complicated. The other sort of side of it is once technology is integrated, it's how you get it on site. And I always feel like you can personalize lots of different channels. So below the line communications, Maria's example with their first name, last name, that's the simplest form of personalization, right? Putting someone's name in an email. You can always personalize below the line channels, and it's perhaps ostensibly a little more straightforward because you can do it with lists, right? You don't have to integrate technology, you can do it with lists. The bottom line, most people don't read emails, most people don't engage with below the line comms. So for us, getting it on site is so much more important. And so the second part of the integration is making sure that the QA process is right and that actually you're seeing what you want to see. But beyond that, data in, processing, API, data out. It's a really simple, genuinely simple process with very few places for it to go wrong and easily identifiable places for it to go wrong.
And then Maria, from your experience, then how was it getting that content up on site? How was your sort of integration process and starting actually actualizing the software into your strategy?
Well, we had to go through it twice because we migrated from one platform to another and then cover 5 different brands. So it was not as painful as I expected. And once you integrated one product, then it's easy to replicate it on others. So yeah, pretty much straightforward.
Perfect. Thanks so much, guys. We're going to move on now to talk about the financial upsides. As we all know, money talks. So Maria, what have been the financial upsides for you guys as operators? And how does personalization impact some of those key performance indicators in your experience?
Well, I did not expect to kill all the birds with one stone. I prefer that approach when you establish a pain point from customer perspective, or you look at your reports and think about particular KPI that you want to improve. And then you think about use cases and what you want to achieve. Perhaps you have a pool of regular players who only play one product, and this product has low spend. Then you want to try and introduce them to another product by recommending them a game that they're more likely to play within this product. Then you might want to add an explanation. We recommend you this game because we know that you love that game. And as for results, initially from cross-sell, we've got fantastic uplift, up to 70% uplift on turnover. But initially you get cross-sold all the players who are more likely to be cross-sold naturally. So then if you leave this campaign going, you might see that KPIs have not such impressive uplifts, but still it's going to bring some stable results. And most of my personalization tests for yields were focused around improving turnover. However, it goes hand in hand, and there are other correlated KPIs. You will see, hopefully, uplift on number of varieties of games played when you introduce players to new games, for example. And your retention rate will improve as well, because if you recommend a game that customer likes, they'll be more likely to carry on coming back to your casino site. And another interesting point is session duration. How do you make sure that customer get more enjoyable experience and stick to you for longer? And as Damien mentioned, we saw decrease in number of unconverted sessions where customers come on site and they don't play any games at all. Also, one of the interesting tests was around bonus, no bonus approach. So we A/B tested different ways of introducing new games. You can say, play this game, spend £15 and get some free spins on the game. Or you can say, play this game, we guarantee you're going to love it because we know that you like to play this type of games, and you give customer an explanation. And when we checked the results of this A/B test, we were quite surprised because customers who did not have any bonus naturally spent more, and there was twice more players who tried this new game. And then I asked myself why this might happen. Maybe for some players, when you ask them to spend, let's say, £15 or £20 or £50, depending on what segment you target, maybe this amount is too high to spend so much on a new game, even though normally this is what they spend, or maybe they spend even more. But when you think about bonus approach, you need to make it profitable, you need to return investment. And when you just offer a new game and you give explanation to customer why you recommended this game, naturally they can spend just £1 because maybe they didn't like this game, or they can spend £100 and they're not thinking how much you ask them to spend. They no longer thinking about bonus conditions, they just enjoying the gameplay. And nowadays with increasing influence of responsible gambling, it becomes more and more important to introduce content-driven approach, and this might be a future solution for CRM campaigns and for on-site campaigns. This is the beauty of recommendation and personalization. It's also ethical.
Wonderful. And before I open out to Damien and Eduardo to add some commentary around this particular topic, could you quickly give us a little bit of insight into your experience personalizing Gala with Graphyte software?
With Gala, we've done many different tests, and probably the most interesting test was homepage personalization, where initially I challenged my dev to find a solution how to use information around gameplay and where customers are launching the games from, and make sure that we only show relevant content to them. Initially, we could not find a way to make it happen in a way how I saw it, but with Graphyte, after maybe a couple of weeks of development, we found it, and we still keep developing this approach, but it definitely brings significant uplift, and it improves customer experience.
Excellent, thanks so much. And Damien and Eduardo, would you, either of you, want to add anything to what you see as the sort of bottom line impact on operators?
I think you pretty much covered it all really earlier on there, Maria. It comes back to what I said earlier on. If your customer is happy, if the engagement levels are high, for an operator, that's that's kind of the holy grail, really. It's what you want.
Yeah, I would add a couple of points. The first thing, to reiterate what Maria said about content versus bonusing, I think it's really important on a couple of levels. One, bonuses may well become impossible to deliver to customers because of regulation and an increasing number of territories. So to have an alternative, right, from bonusing, I think it's essential, right? So just as a general point, I think it's essential to have that. It's also really interesting that actually choosing between the two mechanisms of just something that's relevant as content and something that's incentivized with some kind of margin sapping bonus related to it, I think is really telling that the power of kind of personalized content is really, really important and outweighs bonuses and incentives. So I think it's really important to re-emphasize that, because it surprised all of us actually that the results of that, I have to say. The other thing I would say is that there's no limit to the ROI you can generate from personalization. Right? There's no perfect point. There's no completely personalized outcome. There will always be new features in the product. There will always be new games. There will always be new channels that you can interact with. And that means with the right strategy and the right technology, it will just keep on going up. Right? You invest in the technology and the right people to drive the deployment. It's like Maria. I mean, Maria's right at the vanguard of personalization across everything that she does, and wants to make it. It's all about the customer, that she wants to use the technology in the right way. If you get that balance between business side people like Maria who want to drive from the customer point of view, and then the right technology, there is literally no limit to what you can.
And maybe, sorry, Damien, for interrupting. Maybe to add here, I had a lot of ideas, and sometimes it was difficult to find, let's say, BI resource to implement the ideas or development and connect all the points, even when, let's say, something was ready from BI point of view. And Graphyte gives this easy interface where if suddenly I have an idea of, let's say, churn prevention campaign, and I want to tailor my recommendations to a particular segment, or I want to tailor my recommendations to a particular provider for the gaming, or I want a certain number of games as return on my recommendation, I can do and set it up as a marketing specialist. I don't need any special knowledge of SQL. I don't need to work with databases directly. So it's very user-friendly, and it gives you an opportunity to implement all of your ideas and do it quite quickly.
Perfect. Thanks so much, guys. Just as a heads up to the audience, as we are approaching the end of the panel segment, is you can carry on sending your questions in through the Q&A portal, and we'll be addressing them once we've gotten to the end of this slide. First things first, I think the main thing we'd want to sort of target here and discuss here is what the big key takeaways are for operators who've been listening to us today. From each of you, you've all got different experiences, you've all got different backgrounds. Eduardo, what would you say the big takeaways that you would want our audience listening today to understand are?
I mean, for me, having been on the operator side for so many years, and knowing what a heavy lift it is to go and develop this software, I would advise people to steer away from trying to do it all in-house and to look at using an external resource to go and do that. The benefits, we've been through them. It's, as Damien said, they're kind of a no-brainer. So from my side, I would say, just try to minimize that cost of not doing it. To do it sooner rather than later would be my advice.
Perfect. And Damien, any big salient points you want to give to people here today?
Not to sound like a broken record, but personalize the lobby. Like, it's the most important thing you can do. A personalized lobby is the pathway to untold riches. It's the most effective way of deploying personalization. People will see that 100% of your users will see it. They'll all be influenced by it, and it will drive immediate financial and customer experience gains, the likes of which you cannot generate through any kind of tactical activity. It's the most important thing you can do. And then just like one last point, as professionals in gaming, it's like, I'm not sure who's on the webinar, but I'm assuming it's a mixture of people from marketing, products, operations, stuff like that. As professionals, one of the softer benefits is when you deliver something like this, so deliver a personalized homepage like Maria was talking about, it's this completely dynamic lobby. And you can log in with like a few different accounts with different profiles, and you see entirely different pages that are just elegantly presented and completely targeted. It's just on a personal level, it's actually just very cool. It's achingly cool looking at this. It's very gratifying looking at the output, knowing that there'll be thousands or hundreds of thousands of other users seeing this same, getting this same just very cool, very relevant site experience. So it's gratifying on a personal level as well.
Splendid. And then last but not least, Maria, what would be your key takeaways for our listeners today?
Well, always keep customer experience in mind. In the end, we're working to deliver enjoyable experience to our customers. They come to our casino sites to have fun, and this is our job to make sure that every touch point is enjoyable for them. And always test and improve and analyze your results and try to improve even further in order to deliver the best experience for your players, and not try to resolve all the problems at the same time. Think about each particular use case, how it can be resolved, what can you do to improve particular KPIs.
Amazing. Thanks so much, guys. So as I mentioned, we'll be moving on to the Q&A segment of our webinar today. We've got a lot of questions to crack through already. So what I will say is if we don't get around to your question, don't worry about it. We'll be passing these questions over to the panel after the session, and we'll either try and answer them in our post-webinar marketing or alternatively by reaching out if you agree to do so. So to start us off, and this is a question that we try and ask anyone who comes on and says that they are offering personalization and use of AI. It's something everyone says they can do, but more often than not, it seems to be more targeted recommendation, as Eduardo pointed out earlier. So what do we define as true personalization, and how granular can we get with the data we're using? I'd say, Damien, let's start with you, and then we'll open out to Maria and Eduardo afterwards.
Okay, I would say, simplistically speaking, true personalization, every touch point should be unique and targeted. But that's it in a nutshell. So whether it's an email, whether it's the login screen, whether it's a landing page before you create an account, whether it's like when you're 10 months into your journey with an operator, every touch point should be targeted. I think that's the pinnacle for me.
Eduardo, would you agree? Anything else to add? Well, I agree, really. There's a number of different, I suppose, components of it. It's having that omni-channel approach, omni-channel and media integration. It's about having both the push-pull interactive marketing component. There's an area that tackles that. There's the interactive marketing parts, of course. The segmentation, obviously, is algorithmic. That's the AI part. And having some automatic decision-making orchestration, which you can administer to the back end, as Maria mentioned, and earlier we talked about those the fact that the operators need to have a kind of ability to configure certain games and positions and things. Those are key, and it's got to be one-to-one. as Damien said, not one to some or one to a large group of cohorts. It should be on the individual level.
And then Maria, from your end.
Well, with my experience in gaming, a meaning of word personalization changes over the years. I remember maybe 5 years ago, we called personalization when we added first name into the email, and wow, email is personalized. But it's not the same when we talk about personalization at the moment. If I want to send an email to customer and say that, have you enjoyed playing this game yesterday? Those are the best games for you to play today. I expect that all of the games that I have on site are going to be included into this email, and I don't have to think about how I'm going to get all the images. Am I going to overload my design team with requests of 300 different thumbnails and stuff like that? It's no longer a solution. I don't have to choose 3 optimal games that cover all the use cases, how it was a couple of years ago. It is all absolutely dynamic, and as Damien said, it's personalized to each player. Each player is going to see their own version of the email. Each player is going to see their own version of the pop-up, of the website, and this is a true personalization.
So it's obviously an evolving technology, it's an evolving solution, and like you say, it meant something very different a few years ago than it does now. I think that we're also in a season of change, and it's very hard to go these days without talking about what's happening in the world with COVID-19. And a lot of people are saying that it could really change the role of personalization, and that it's going to really change how players interact with content. What role do you guys see personalization playing and evolving towards following the impact of COVID-19? Perhaps Maria, you can kick us off with that.
Yeah, I've already mentioned it briefly today. Sometimes you have to worry and you have to think twice in regards to the offers. You have to make sure that you don't stretch the spend beyond what customer can afford. You need to be extra careful in terms of what you send into customers and when, what kind of offers you give. And when you purely give recommendations, when you purely improve customer experience on site, there is no risk. You're not doing anything wrong. You just deliver the product that they want to interact with, and they spend their time. They're willing to play with your product because this product is so good. And it can't be a wrong approach here, unlike offers.
Damien, Eduardo, anything to add on how you see it evolving after the pandemic?
For me, I suppose it'll always be evolving because it's kind of a journey. It's not static as such. I think it's more that people's patterns have shifted, haven't they? So whereas you might have gone into a physical casino at one point, you know that's become much more challenging. So you would expect to see some people that are shifting to new channels. And again, you want to make sure that you give those people an awesome experience. So and of course, we're talking today about casinos, but the same could be held true for sporting events, for sportsbook type scenarios as well. So it could go into a number of different areas and different verticals, even within the iGaming industry, for sure.
Yeah, that's actually one of the questions we've had from the audience as well, is other than casino products, how important is personalization for sports betting operators, but also things like bingo as well?
I mean, I can start with sports betting. If you think about it's the size of the inventory, okay, it's pretty quiet right these days, but typically when all sports are live, you have an enormous amount of games, sporting events on offer. It's event driven. Again, the rise in mobile sports betting is phenomenal. So you've got the same issues around having a very small amount of screen real estate. So the same principles apply, really. You want to make sure that if somebody is really interested in horse racing, then they should be seeing that, right in the center, not hidden way below the fold and having to struggle to find things. So it's absolutely relevant, and Graphyte actually offers that as well. They have a sports betting solution, I believe.
Yeah, we do. I want to join these 2 questions up actually. Maria, you can chime in on this one I think as well. So the COVID angle is ultra relevant at the moment, right? On loads of different sort of axes, right? So one of them is the change of behaviour from land-based activities in every industry, right? But in gaming in particular. So you can't go to a physical casino anymore. You can't go to a bingo hall anymore, right? You can't go to a betting shop anymore. So those 3 kind of pillars of like retail, gaming, gambling have had to move online. This is where one of the key sort of the key upsides of personalization in its ability to react to tactical changes or like short-term changes in behavior like this. I mean, this is an extreme change in behavior, but short-term changes in behavior, like lots of retail bingo players coming online. Okay, what do I do? So there's 2 options, and I've seen a lot of bingo sites have done this actually across the UK. They've tried to create a curated approach to what games they think bingo players might like based on a retail presence in the terminals or some such. Actually, that's an interesting approach and a worthwhile one in the beginning, but that would evolve over time. And not every player is going to want to play every single retail slot game. And so that's where personalization comes in. So actually take a smart default view of this and then change it over time. Make sure that you evolve with the player. And then actually, if they are going to stay doing that stuff with the retail type games, then by all means, then. If not, off to go. The other point is on the sports stuff. So actually, although sports revenues dropped off a cliff for most operators, right? Really significant reductions, 50%, 60% and beyond in some cases. There is still some activity, right? I mean, like whether it's Belarusian football that we always joke about internally, or wherever it was in Nicaragua or something. We were talking about it, but there are still players that want to engage with that content. How do you manage the marketing, right? How do you manage that on a kind of like automated, smart way? So there was still, even though there was, I don't know, 10, 15% of sort of standard bettable inventory through the real peak period of COVID, there's still interesting stuff for some people, right? So actually, there's value in having that kind of software just to mitigate, right? Mitigate the difficult situation. Third point, also related to COVID, the influx into gaming products. So poker was huge, right? Everybody saw a massive increase in poker volumes. How do you make sure you find those users that you think might be interested in poker that maybe aren't playing poker on your site? The first point. Secondly, with the gaming stuff, you've got an active base of sports users all bored. How do you drive them to gaming? Do you just go with one offer on like Frankie Dettori's Magic Sevens, or do you do it in a more sophisticated way and make the journey nice, make it fun, and make it content related, and then continue to personalize on those sports players that have come over because they have much more time on their hands to play a bit of gaming. So they are all kind of linked, and actually all really powerful cases for personalization. And Maria, I don't know if you want to comment on the retail bingo thing that I just said.
Well, with bingo, the approach is quite similar as approach with the gaming, and we use it across both products. Equally, it works well. I've mentioned already some cross-sell campaigns that you can do across the products, and maybe just one additional aspect in relation to bingo cohort and in relation to new players, you might as well try different approach where instead of looking at customer specific gameplay, you can look at groups of customers. So for instance, you look at group of players with bingo preference, and if they're new players, you don't know much about them, but you know that they like to play bingo, then you might introduce them to the games that other players like them enjoy. Or you can think about trending games, and Graphyte allows to use different methods of recommendations, and as a user you can just pick the method you want and use it in the most appropriate situation.
We've actually got a question here for you, Maria, about how that bingo experience was for you, which is, did the majority of uplift come from content housed outside of the bingo lobby when you integrated Graphyte with Gala?
Yes, it was outside bingo lobby. We think about the best moments when we want to present recommendations to customers, and normally if everything goes as expected, let's say customer logs in on site, they launch their favorite bingo room when we expect them to do so. We don't interact, we just we allow them to enjoy their normal experience and carry on doing what they're doing. And then if, for example, something goes wrong and we expect them to launch a game, they haven't launched the game, then we can give them a recommendation and help them to find their favorite bingo game. Or if they close the lobby, then we can suggest the next best game to play. Or as a result of their gameplay, we can send them an email to say, oh, this is the next best game for you to play, and it can be within bingo or it can be within other products.
Wonderful. We've got just about enough time for one more question. Are personalized games offered based on a player's affinity for themes and art style, or is it more likely to be based on game mechanics like features or volatility? What's been the more effective approach? I don't know if, Maria, that's something you guys have explored when you've been implementing the solution in your various different use cases.
Well, I think it's actually a good question for Damien rather than me, because he's responsible for logic behind the recommendations. Yeah.
Fire away, Damien.
It's a mixture. It's a short version. We look at all of that. So we look at the kind of descriptive components and the game features as mentioned. So like game characteristics, so volatility and all those kind of play metrics. And then we look at the thematic and the visual components as well. Because the visuals are a huge part of this. I said this right at the top of the webinar. The thumbnails, the imagery, is a really important part of catching the eye. Those images are as important as the kind of like textual data that's attached to it, because that's what people see. It's the thumbnails, it's the imagery. So we use all of it together.
It's actually something you can all go away with homework in our audience today, is look at your Netflix and then look at your friend's Netflix. It's not just the titles that are different. The thumbnails for the show are different from account to account, depending on what is most appealing to you as a user. So absolutely, the visuals are, like Damien says, really important. So that can be your homework for the audience today. That is unfortunately all we've got time for, though. There's a lot of questions we didn't get to, and we apologize for that. However, like I say, we'll be doing our best to make sure we get those answers out there. You can contact Symphony Solutions directly with the email address you can see on screen right now. And if you have any questions directed towards iGaming Business, you can email us at info@igamingbusiness.com. Today's webinar has been recorded and will be available to listen to on demand shortly on igamingbusiness.com, where you can rewatch it and share with your colleagues. Otherwise, that's all we've got time for, and we'll be seeing you all soon, I hope. Thanks so much to our panel.
Thanks.
Super.
Bye.
Thank you, everybody.
You.
Bye-bye.